Property taxes on Nebraska farm ground have skyrocketed over the years. Now Nebraska lawmakers want to know, would you pay a higher sales tax rate if it means your Nebraska property tax bill goes down?
It's property taxes, then it's followed by property taxes, followed by property taxes.
Straight ahead, we hear from one of the architects of the new plan and some critics.
I'm humbled.
Plus, we meet the newest state senator, a farmer and cattle feeder stepping into big shoes. Later, now that the cold appears to be here to stay, what considerations cow-calf producers should consider to keep cows in good condition. It's time to grow. We hear it across the state. Even this guy's probably heard it. Property taxes are too high. But would you be willing to pay a higher sales tax rate if it brings those real estate taxes down? NTV's Shady Ferguson has our story.
There's one thing Senator Mike Jacobson says he hears from voters.
It's property taxes, then it's followed by property taxes, followed by property taxes.
He's been part of Governor Jim Pillen's working group that is going to propose shifting the burden away from property taxes through higher sales taxes.
Maybe not 2 cents, but maybe a cent. The goal would be to try to raise close to $1 billion in new revenue. That could be a direct property tax credit.
Jacobson says the state's tax structure is built on a model that three things should be equal: property, income, and sales tax. But it's far from it.
$5 billion a year is being raised in property taxes, both personal and real property taxes. About $4 billion a year is being collected in income taxes. $2.3 billion is being collected in sales tax.
But the proposal could give Nebraska the highest sales tax rate in the nation, and Senator John Lowe would prefer measures to rein in spending.
That would be very concerning to me.
Others yet think the whole system needs to be scrapped in favor of a consumption tax.
EPIC is the answer to solve our problems, and what the governor is trying to do by raising the sales tax, he says we can't tax fixed income people and low income people on their necessities.
Pillen has called EPIC a job killer, and those like Jacobson say it'll transform the tax system in a major way. However, the Open Sky Policy Institute says it's a 36% tax hike for all Nebraskans just to help property owners. Jacobson disputes that, as he stands with the governor.
I think this is a good direction. I applaud the governor for bringing the idea and spending the time to bring it together, and he'll have my support.
And you heard about it there, another controversial proposal, that EPIC tax option. Senator Steve Erdman wants to eliminate property, income, and corporate taxes, and in its place, the state would collect a consumption tax around 8% on goods and services. There's a petition drive to put it on the ballot.
If EPIC were law of the land, what's that going to mean for some of these, that are agricultural taxes?
The agriculture guys won't pay any property tax, personal or real. All right, their income tax, state income tax, goes away, and they only pay a consumption tax on those things they consume.
Other lawmakers question the idea.
I don't think much of it at all. I honestly do not see how it's ever going to fund what we need to fund, and especially like education and important things like that.
However, supporters say property taxes in particular are out of whack, and they believe the state needs an entirely new tax structure. The last farm bill, the 2018 edition, made hemp production legal in the United States. And as part of that, Nebraska adopted its own hemp farming rules. Now the state may turn that back over to the USDA as part of the Attorney General's efforts on marijuana. Marketed for everything from anxiety to cancer, these products derived from hemp are now commonplace. Now, a growing concern, stuff that looks like candy, but is no child's play.
We tested well over 100 products, and almost 90% of those products were mislabeled, many of which had incredibly high amounts of chemicals, including Delta-8, but not limited to Delta-8, that frankly put a whole large number of Nebraskans at risk.
Attorney General Mike Hilgers and Senator Teresa Iowa have teamed up for legislation banning psychoactive chemicals.
We do not want to inhibit the sale of CBD products because it's a legal product, but we want to cap it there.
Hilgers and Iowa say CBD is fine. In fact, as a state senator, Hilgers voted for legislation allowing hemp production, and Iowa's husband worked on it when he was a top official at the USDA.
So our goal is to not inhibit the farming or the production of hemp, but it is to cap it at CBD products.
The state created its own hemp rules, but this proposal would hand that back to the USDA while also addressing a technicality.
A loophole that is not a loophole. How people will try to exploit the existing law, which was meant to create hemp commodity products, to sell utterly dangerous, totally untested products to Nebraska children. It makes me want to double down on my opposition to any sort of allowance or permitting the sale of marijuana.
Visiting now with Troy Walls, a beef systems extension educator with the University of Nebraska. Troy, we've been pretty spoiled up until Christmas. Pretty mild weather, but it has hit now. And when we look at cattle and dealing with some of that cold stress, there's probably some considerations we should be keeping in mind.
Yes, absolutely. Our fall has been ideal for putting weight on cattle, actually. Yeah. So as we think about our cows this time of year, we have them out, maybe out on corn stalks, or we have them out in the pasture, or maybe in the lot. We need to think about how this cold is going to affect their energy requirements. And as we think about cold, what we have to think about is as it gets colder, if we reach a certain temperature, cows have to have more energy just to maintain their body temperature.
And then probably just the condition of that cow is going to be impacted certainly by the cold.
Absolutely. When we think about body condition, that is the fat reserves that they have, and we have a scale from 1 to 9, and we like to have our cows in a body condition score of 5. And the other thing we need to think about too is their winter coat. We want cows with a long winter coat, and that will help keep them warm and be able to withstand some of these temperature extremes that we have.
Fortunately, though, we've probably had some weather that's been good for getting them a little maybe fatter and ready for the season here.
That is absolutely correct. And so we talk about body condition. If we have that fat reserves on them, we have some extra fat that maybe they can use to help maintain that temperature. So if we think about that cow, body condition score 5, she has a good winter hair coat. Her lower critical temperature is 19 degrees. Okay. 19 degrees Fahrenheit. So when it gets below that, she's going to need more energy to just maintain her body heat. And if we have a thin cow, body condition score, that lower temperature for her is 27 degrees. So that's a big difference for those animals. So that's why we talk about, if you have thin cows and fat cows, try to feed them separately, because you're going to have to feed that thin cow a lot more just to meet her energy requirements. And this is when the cows are dry. And then if the cows are actually wet, if we have a wet winter, it's kind of drizzly, raining, that lower critical temperature jumps to 53 degrees. So there's really no time in the winter, if they're wet, that we're not meeting their energy requirements with a regular ration. We're going to have to up that energy content for them.
Let's talk then specifically about cattle that are out on stalks. Certainly there's benefits to that, but there's some considerations because you're probably lacking some of those natural windbreaks that you might have more, in a pasture type setting.
Yes, absolutely. Corn stalks and corn residue, as we know, are excellent feed, cheap way to feed our cows in the winter, meet those requirements.
And bring that manure back into the soil, that's not bad either.
That's not bad, yeah. Spread it naturally, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to think about wind chill here in Nebraska and wherever we're at. If it's in the lot, in the pasture, in the pasture at least cows have maybe some trees around that they can get behind, or maybe they have a coulee or a canyon they can get down out of the wind. But if they're on a flat pasture or out flat cornstalk field, that wind is going to drop that requirement a lot. That temperature for them. So even if it's 10 miles an hour, maybe it drops the wind chill factor 10 degrees or something like that, and it's going to be below their energy requirements. So if they can just have some natural windbreak, or you put up some type of windbreak, that's going to decrease the amount of energy that you have to feed to meet their heat requirements.
Up next, we visit with Nebraska Extension on the crop side about some great upcoming events. Stay with us.
It's time to start thinking about planting. Steve is joining us now from Nebraska Extension with a look at some of the trainings that are coming up pretty fast. Steve, let's talk about these winter meetings. What goes into making these programs?
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. I certainly want to emphasize the fact that Extension does do a lot of training for agriculture in the wintertime, and our face-to-face programs are starting off right away here. We're research-based programming. We always get the comments from our participants that they're some of the best educational programs that they attend each year. And starting those off are right away tomorrow out in Gearing with a crop production clinic, and then those move across the state in North Platte, at Norfolk, Meade, Beatrice, Hastings, York, and wrapping up the series on January 23rd in Kearney. And that's just kind of the beginning of it. After that, we move into the pesticide and chemigation certification trainings. If your certification needs to be redone this year, you should have received a letter. However, if you're just starting new or you let it lapse, you won't be receiving a letter reminder of that, but certainly contact your local extension office. A couple other meetings that I might lift up that we're having here more local to my area is a Nebraska crop production or a corn production meeting on February 5th in Aurora. And we're going to cover basically soup to nuts and corn production, an advanced level program for anybody that's been farming a few years. It'd be just right for you to attend. We'll be offering CCA credits as well as the Upper Big Blue nitrogen management certification credits. On February 15th, we've got a Nebraska soybean production clinic. And that's going to be here where my office is at in Central City at the fairgrounds, and basically the same type of an idea. Then we're going to focus on soybean production for the area. Both these will be primarily irrigated focus on these, and CCA credits have been applied for with that as well. Numerous other programs going on. Check with your local extension office if you are interested in any of these and find out where they're at, or you can certainly look things up on my website, which is merrick.unl.edu, and go to my ag website there, and you can find any of these. You can do a web search for extension and find out most of these programs as well.
And we'll have some of your flyers up on our website, nebraska.tv, as well. There's some certifications that you need, but why is it so important for producers to get off the farm and come in and have these in-person trainings?
Well, certainly anytime you get together with your colleagues, other farmers and ag consultant people, both of these shows I mentioned have trade shows with them as well. You just get a chance to see what everybody else is up to. And then when we get to our educational programs, they're all research-based. We have, field trials that we conduct each year that we give reports on and can answer questions and just give you a different perspective than you have when all you're taking a look at is your own operation.
And I imagine how we do things and the rules to do them change every year.
Well, certainly the research continues on, and we learn new things and figure out things. The pesticide certification and chemigation, of course, are updates on what has changed, as well as just the required training that you need to have each year.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all that information, Steve.
The cold appears to be settling in. Our Grow Weather Outlook is next.
Well, it has been a hot minute since we last showed you the drought monitor across the Central Plains. Here it is looking a lot better compared to the last time that we had this up. Got a closer look now at the state of Kansas, comparing this to last week's report. It's looking pretty similar. Of course, 20.5% of the state in no drought. Abnormally dry now sitting at roughly 79.5% of the state. Just a slight decrease from what we had last week. Otherwise, the rest of these categories the same as the week prior. 53.5% of the state in moderate drought. About 19.5% of the state still in severe drought. 2.88%, a couple of splotches here across the state in extreme drought, and there's still no exceptional drought. Very nice to see that. Moving up to Nebraska, we've had some very nice changes over the last couple of weeks or so. Obviously, still very dry across the east central parts. 60% of the state in no drought now, which is good to see. Abnormally dry, about 40% of the state there. Moderate drought standing at about 26 1/3%, about the same as compared to last week. About 18 3/4% now in severe drought. About a 3/4% increase from last week. Extreme drought, about 7.25%, a 2.5% improvement from last week. Very nice to see that. And the exceptional drought, now just 0.17% of the state there in Butler County. In the exceptional drought, about a 2% improvement from last week. So nice to see that exceptional drought fading fast across Nebraska. Looking at the January temperature outlook, it's just released recently, expecting below average temperatures for really all of Nebraska as well as all of Kansas. So maybe a little chilly. Old man winter arriving here. Precipitation outlook for the month of January. Pretty average totals expected for northwestern parts of Nebraska, including the Panhandle. Otherwise above average precipitation expected for the rest of Nebraska as well as all of Kansas. So good to see that. Maybe get some snow here before too long as well. The next 3-month temperature outlook, maybe slightly above average here for parts of extreme northern Nebraska. Otherwise, pretty average for the rest of us and near seasonal for parts of central and southern Kansas there as well. Looking at the next 3 months in terms of precipitation, looking at pretty average amounts, although slightly above average precipitation totals there for a good chunk of Nebraska as well as a good chunk of Kansas. So nice to see these trends go in the right direction. Otherwise, the Grow Almanac here for the next week, normally we see a high around 36 and normally we see a low around 16. Looking like a colder week ahead, especially towards the tail end of the week, and Arctic air masses moving in. 24 for a high this average next week. 13 is the average low for the next week as well. So get a look at your Grow week ahead here, starting off a little on the snowy side. In fact, maybe some blizzard-like conditions to start off our week. Travel definitely impacted with that wind and all that snow out there as well. Of course, that snow finally moving out for us on Tuesday. Wednesday probably going to be our nicest day of the week, but more snowfall potential again Wednesday night into Thursday, maybe sticking around a little bit on Friday before it gets really cold towards the end of the week as well. Well, since it's been a hot minute again, we'll give you 2 proverbs for this week. Heavy snows in winter favor the crops of the following summer, of course. With the snow in the forecast, maybe a good sign of things to come. And we've had a lot of this lately, too. Fog. Fog in January brings a wet spring. So the old proverb of 90 days after a fog brings some rain might be a wet start to early April. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see in time. Well, that is a check of your Grow Weather Report. Stay tuned next week when once again it will be time to grow.
Now we look at our photos of the week. The frost, freezing fog, and snow have made for some spectacular views lately. Rita Floor shared several photos we wanted to highlight this week. And to share yours, it's pretty easy. You go to Nebraska.tv and look for the Chime In feature on our website to upload your shots of rural Nebraska and agriculture in action. A short timer with a long-time perspective. We'll meet Nebraska's newest state senator.
The Farm Family of the Month is sponsored by the Nebraska Soybean Board, feeding, fueling, and innovating for the future.
A short-term senator with a long-term commitment to Nebraska agriculture. Fred Meyer of St. Paul, coming from the feedlot to the Capitol. Looking up to see his name in lights. Fred Meyer is now Senator Meyer, and at his side, just as she was nearly a half-century ago, is his wife, Kay. Both served as state FFA officers, but no longer a future farmer. Now he's semi-retired.
I farmed and ranched since 1978. Originally from West Point, Nebraska, moved out to central Nebraska where my wife is from, born and raised there. We've ran in the cattle business most of that time. I have one son now that runs our feed yard and had 3 sons all in business around the St. Paul area.
The former president of the State Board of Education has been out of office for a dozen years, but answered the governor's call when Senator Tom Breese resigned to become treasurer.
And out of respect for those 2 gentlemen, I was willing to do it for 1 year, knowing that I will not be running for the permanent job.
The seat is on this year's ballot, and the governor decided not to give one of the candidates a head start, leaving that choice to voters and asking the St. Paul cattle feeder to step up.
I'm humbled to represent that part of the district. People have been so kind, complimenting me on my appointment.
On policy, he's most familiar with education and taxes. Coincidentally, the committees Breezy served on, and he'll continue, bringing his own experience to the discussion.
I've rented my crop ground out, and just the real estate taxes takes roughly 1/3 of my income to pay the real estate taxes. At the same time, my son, who's in the cattle business, was able to purchase a small ranch up by Erickson, and needless to say, he's just starting in the operation, so he's trying to make payments on the real estate as well as pay the real estate taxes, and that's a tough deal for young people as well.
Congratulations to Fred and his wife Kay, past Farm Family of the Month right here on NTV, now serving in the state legislature. And we'll see you back here next time as we see how agriculture makes Nebraska grow.
NTV's GROW is brought to you by Aurora Cooperative. Tougher together, Aurora and you.